Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of our chats with our 2020 Liberty Flames Hall of Fame inductees, now joined by former head coach Morgan Hout. And, Coach, congratulations. What a phenomenal honor for you. When you got the call from the athletics department to join the Hall of Fame, what were your thoughts?
Well, it was really, I was so elated, and so surprised, I guess, or so, um, I really didn't know what to think, to be honest with you. I really am totally humbled and honored and the whole thing. And, so many years, that this thing's been going on. And I just really appreciated so much when Ian gave me that call.
You and I have caught up a lot about your history at Liberty and kind of how you got to campus. What do you recall about uh, accepting the job and building that program from a D2 level up to Division One? Put all that into words and what that was like for you.
Okay, well, I know one thing. It was a lot of hard work, and it was too big of a job for one guy. And I'm so thankful to my wife, number one, for being willing to come to Lynchburg and help us get this done. And there's no way I could have done it without her. And then several key steps. The first hire I ever made here was Coach Dave Williams. He was the head strength coach at Texas A&M, and got to know him through the phone and that kind of thing. And he actually is from uh, Bedford, and so we got together. And once I spoke with and saw his passion, and I knew a little bit about the strength program and conditioning, but not nearly as much as I wanted to. And when we were at the University of Maryland, we were the first strength program on the whole East Coast that had our own strength coach and developed a program just for our players. And I knew the importance of that. And I saw what it did for us at Maryland. And I wanted a quality person to be in charge of that for us. And he's a man of God, totally. And he's got a servant's heart. And I remember uh, everything that he did back. This was back when he was younger, but everything that we did, we're going to do that day. He went in earlier in the day and went through the whole routine so he could experience what it felt like in his body, and which showed me his dedication. But a key hire like that came out of big time college football, as I did at University of Maryland, and I knew he knew what it took. And so one thing I was smart enough to do is to stand back, take my hands off, and let him do what he did. Now, I always, because of my curiosity, I always wanted to know what he was doing and why and that kind of thing. But so that was a great relationship we had, and still is. In fact, I spoke with him yesterday, and uh, so that was a key thing. But I do know this, that it was too much for one guy to do. So I asked the Lord to bring us the right staff in here, and He did. And by the time we were done here, we had a tremendous staff, and I really appreciated their hard work.
Finishing up in 1988, a really good football team. What was that the best team you had? You think during your time here as the head coach?
At Liberty, it was, although we took the job in June, and had to start the season just a few weeks later, and with practice and everything. And then that first team was always special. You know, we had kids like Phil Basso, who was a great quarterback, and Kelvin Edwards and Freddie Banks, who both spent a good deal of time in the NFL, quality players. And you know, and the thing that really blessed me about the whole thing is how the kids took to the teaching we were doing and the goal and the vision. You know, one reason why I wanted to come here is I used to hear Dr. Falwell stand in the pulpit and talk about how he wanted to build a program here that would be able to play one day Notre Dame and Brigham Young and those kind of people. And you know, we played Brigham Young last year, and so I believed in the vision he was proposing, and I didn't have the mind of the vision that he had. But one of the things we did, especially the last few years, is recruit to what we have here now, the stadium and facilities, because one thing about Dr. Falwell is he understood a vision of what it would take to be Division I, and that culminated this year in our victory in the Cure Bowl. And that was a very, very big victory in the history of Liberty University. And I remember our first year here, things are a little bit different now. We didn't get to fly everywhere and that kind of thing, and trips. And I remember taking a 14-hour bus ride down to Georgia Southern, and interminably long trip. And they had a quarterback named Tracy Ham, who a lot of people that know football know that Tracy not only was a great college quarterback, but he played a long time up in the CFL, and great athlete. And you know, we just had a hard time getting close enough to tackle him. And so but that was the first big time road trip that we took. And as it turned out, they beat us quite handily. And it was quite poignant to me to be down at the bowl game in Orlando. That same team that we played our first year, we turned around and beat them in that bowl game. So it just shows the growth of this program.
Morgan, was there a set of events, a turning point during your time as head coach where you maybe had some conversations with the staff of, you know what, the things we're doing, it's beginning to make a difference?
Yeah, we would, of course, like most staffs, meet every day and talk about goals and all the different things that we wanted to do. And we would grade our games and our people. And we would use measuring sticks. And, you know, I knew what it took to be a Division I program, as did Coach Williams. And having worked with those great athletes they had at Texas A&M. And that's why it was so important for me to get him to be a part of our program, because of his knowledge and his abilities. But a lot of people don't realize Division 1A is a big step. I mean, those kids are Division 1A for a reason. And their size, their speed, their abilities. And so we recruited with the idea that one day we would be Division 1A and go to a bowl game and, you know, grow the program.
joined by 2020 Liberty Flames Athletics Hall of Fame inductee Morgan Hout. You're going in with 5 other individuals. When you looked at the list, anything stand out particularly about this group that you're going into the Hall of Fame with?
Well, I mean, to be inducted at this level, I mean, I don't even know if I can describe it. It's the best of the best. And I'm not saying I'm the best of the best, but the Lord allowed me to be a part of that group. And when I looked at the names on there and saw some of the great athletes, and not all of them were 4-year Liberty people, a couple of them transferred in, but they bought into the Liberty spirit. And I'll say this for those coaches that recruited them. They did a good job of selling Liberty and what we were all about. And these kids believed in what we were all about. And so, you know, one name that stands out to me is Jeff Mincey. I was coaching here when Jeff was a player. And then he got on Coach Worthington's staff and assisted him as a coach. And I think a great deal of Jeff Mincey. He's a hard worker, and he loves Liberty, and he is well deserving to be a part of this group. Not saying anybody else doesn't, but I know Jeff personally. A lot of times, like the other kids that are not kids anymore, you know, with guys that are going in and gals going in, that you know, there's something special about that level. And they were here in the hard times. I remember Jeff Mincey, for example, when Coach Worthington got here and started building that program, you know, they practice down at Miller Park, and I remember him putting a rake, chain link fence rake, on the back of his station wagon and dragging the infield. Here's a guy that pitched in the World Series, won world championships, and was a quality big league player. And here he was, and I often wondered, but I think that people that do that kind of thing, they don't necessarily see, well, I was here in the big leagues pitching against Mickey Mantle and all those guys, and now I'm here dragging this inadequate field for my team to be able to practice on the back of, you know, on the back of my station wagon. And I loved coaching with Coach Worthington. He was a tremendous athletic director for me, and was God's man in the time that I needed, because he was just so such a great person and a great he cared about people, cared about his kids, and that's what I look at as with a coach. Do you really care about the kids, or are you just there try to make them do what could make you successful? Well, my philosophy always is my job is to make you as a player successful, and I'll do whatever I have to do that. Of course, not cheating, I mean, but you know, with the weight program and the coaching, our kids were taught well, and they took to the teaching, and and I had a lot of people that were mentored to me. Vernon Brewer is one, who's now has World Health and doing a tremendous job with that program. And our team sort of adopted him when he was going through cancer, and you know, we had regular prayer meetings with him, and those are the kind of kids that we had. And you know, so the whole thing is really kind of a blur in a way, but also it's so meaningful in so many ways.
Joined by former football coach Morgan Hout, a member of the 2020 Liberty Flames Athletics Hall of Fame. When you went through the process, Coach, of moving the program from Division II to Division I, what were some of those challenges? What are you most proud of being a part of that movement here in the history of the athletics department?
Well, again, I think God prepared me for Division I in my time at University of Maryland, and then at the University of Richmond with Coach Dow Sheely. And he helped me understand what it was going to take for that to happen. And a lot of hard work. I mean, we worked hard as a staff. We'd be in 5:30, 6 o'clock every morning. And of course, I wouldn't get home till 10, 11 or later at night. And, you know, I understood the concept of hard work. I was so blessed to be able to work with Coach Jerry Claiborne. He was one of the great all-time coaches, and he's of course is in the College Football Hall of Fame. And I don't think any of us, although I really tried to stay in the present, realized who he was and what the kind of man he was and the kind of coach he was. And so I was so very blessed and fortunate. And the one that got me introduced to him was a gentleman named Coach Lee Royer. And Coach Royer, of course, was the first football coach here in '73. And it's amazing, that story, how all that was put together. My wife and I were down in Tampa. We were teaching in a Christian school at the time, and they had a Christian teachers convention in Tampa. And one of the speakers was Coach Royer. I'd heard so much about him, never had got a chance to meet him, but I remember him speaking. He was a ball of fire. I mean, he was, during this message, he would move around and he jumped up on a table and started doing push-ups and sit-ups and different things just to talk about the scripture where Paul talks about we beat down our body in order to be able to serve Christ. And so it was just a dynamic experience. And so at that time, I had a tremendous desire to be a college football coach. And so I went up to him after it was over and said, I'd really like to become a college football coach. And we talked for a few minutes, and then he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do a camp. I just became the head coach at Liberty University and Liberty Baptist College at that time. And he says, I'm having a summer camp up in Lynchburg, and I'd like you to come just be with me there at that summer camp. So we did that, and and not only were there, I'm just thinking back on how God has put me in the presence of some great, great football coaches. At that camp was Coach Claiborne, of course, a gentleman named Frank Gans, who was, by the time he was done in NFL, was known as the premier special teams coach in the NFL. And I remember one night, I'm just trying to pick brains of everybody because I wanted to be where they were. And so we were sitting down at Pizza Hut down on Ford Avenue, I guess it was, just Coach Gans and myself. And I was sort of just picking his brain, trying to figure out how and what that would entail. And little did I realize at that time, he was at Oklahoma State. He hadn't even gotten to the NFL yet. And that he took the time to spend with me. There was also a guy named Pete Mccullough, who was quarterback's coach with Baltimore Colts when they had a young man named Burt Jones. At the time, Burt was quite a player. And then Pete actually wound up being the head coach of San Francisco 49ers. And people like that who the Lord put me in front of really helped cement the goal that I think God laid on my heart. And at the time, the Liberty program was first started, and I was at that football camp there. And then a week or so later, we drove up to College Park, Maryland. Coach Claiborne was having his camps, and I stole a few minutes of his time and talked again about wanting to be a college football coach and that kind of thing. And so, got to know him. And during that fall, I would write Coach Claiborne regularly, at least once a week. And the rules were a little bit different at the time. I was coaching again at a small Christian school. And now, if, say, when I was coaching here, if we were playing on the road, I couldn't give tickets to prospective athletes or coaches. And back then, Coach Claiborne could do that. He would get me tickets. I remember going down and seeing him play Carolina and then NC State, and living in Charlotte at the time. But so there's just a lot of things like that God put people in my path that knew my heart and what I wanted to do as far as football. Now, little did I know, and my wife will tell you, that she had no idea what it would entail to be a college football coach. The hours upon hours and all the things that you got to do. It's not just the 3 hours on Saturday afternoon. It's the 70, 80, sometimes 90 hours that you put in during that week to get to that point. And I learned a great work ethic from Coach Claiborne and the staff up there. A bunch of great professional coaches. I didn't mean NFL professional, I meant professional in how they handled themselves, went about doing what they do. And so this thing to come to Liberty was not just an overnight Johnny-come-lately thing. I remember we used to come up here in the early 70s, before Liberty University was even started, and Dr. Fall used to have this thing called the Southside Baptist Fellowship, and it took the place of the Southern Baptist Convention for Independence. And great speakers, great singers. But I would come up here, and I got to know this situation pretty well. And so I remember one time driving down what's known as Ward's Road now. It may have always been known as that. I remember looking up and seeing that there was a billboard talking about NCAA football is coming to Liberty University, NCAA Division II. And people I was riding in the car with were sort of wondering, well, how in the world can they play at that level? I said, well, from what I know and understand, what they're doing is academically, they're putting everything in place that you need to do that. And then, of course, our athletic facilities weren't much at the time. We were down on the island, along with the gnats and the fleas and everything else down there. But the kids just bought into it. And that was the key thing. Coach Claiborne used to tell us all the time, it's not what we know, although we should be the most knowledgeable people about the game. But it's what we can teach the kids. What they can know is how to make them successful. And I believe, and I still do, it doesn't matter what Alabama or Ohio State or UVA or Tech does. If it doesn't fit our kids, then why are we wasting our time with it? So we spent a lot of time adapting systems and X's and O's and the whole 9 yards to our kids and help them understand what it means to be successful.
Joined by Morgan Hout, 2020 Liberty Athletics Hall of Fame inductee. Now you're giving back again to the university, working in a role where you're giving tours and really marketing what we're doing at the school. See the great picture behind you, Coach. In your role today, what do you enjoy about that, and still being a part of the Liberty community?
Well, physically, I'm probably mentally I could do it, but physically I'm not as able to do the things that I once did. Because I was a very active coach. I mean, if you ever saw a video or film of me during the games, I'd run up and down the sidelines. I was very active, jump up and down and hug the kids in the whole 9 yards. But what I do is God's given me an opportunity to be around prospective students. And one of the things that God allowed me to be able to do was to be a very good recruiter. And a lot of people don't understand that's the lifeblood of college athletics. You got to have good players, and the better your players are, the better coach you are. And so I learned the secrets of good recruiting and how to communicate with kids and parents. And so I do that now. Whenever I'm around parents and prospective students, it gives me an opportunity to share Liberty from maybe a little different perspective. But they're still kids, and they're still parents who are looking for an opportunity for the future for them. And I tell them all the time, there's not a better place in America for a Christian young person to go to school than here at Liberty University. They'll be as prepared academically, socially, spiritually as any other college student in America, except for we asking them to understand what it means to be a Christian. And Dr. Fowler came up with that saying. I remember the first time I remember him saying it was back in the 70s when he started saying we're training champions for Christ here. Well, see, I can understand training champions on the football field, and we were able to do that, All-Americans and all those kind of things, and great teams, great players, and into champions, but different kind of champions. So part of my philosophy was such that if you're going to be a champion on the field, you got to be a champion off the field as well. And Coach Claiborne used to talk to us all the time about the great players turn it off and on. In other words, Randy White, for example, he was the greatest football player I've ever seen. College, pro, whatever. And in 74, Randy was a senior, and he won every award that a college senior could win except for the Heisman Trophy. And usually linemen don't win those. Usually it's a back or a quarterback or sometimes wide receivers, but he won every one of them. I personally thought he should have won the Heisman. He was a great, great player. He was 6'4" and 255. That's not real big these days, but back then he was a fairly good-sized youngster. And I remember on the sidelines watching during Maryland games, sometimes he would hit our opponent so hard that I didn't understand how they got up. I mean, he was unbelievable. He could run a 4.6, but the thing about Randy is he wasn't just a great player on Saturdays. He was a great player in the weight room. He was a great player around campus and his teammates. And so, I had a privilege of being around him. With so many great players. And so, just that whole Maryland experience set me up to have success here. You know, I knew we were going to win. You know, we came in and the program was down a little bit and needed help in recruiting. And so it took us a while to do that. And one of the things we developed was the philosophy of recruit for retention. My first 2 years here, 3 years, we were always recruiting, we're always coaching freshmen. And that's a recipe for disaster. I wanted to coach some older guys. I wanted to coach some juniors and seniors. And so, you know, the Lord allows us to be able to build that aspect of the program up. And, you know, people like Paul Johnson, first player we ever signed here from Mathematics High School. And Paul was a great, great player here, great leader, and had a nice touch on the ball. And, you know, the kids really appreciated him. And, but, you know, another local, like Charles McRae, we wanted to recruit the best players we could recruit here in Virginia, and then fill in the rest with people from Georgia and Florida. And that worked for us. And so anyway, there's so many things, Alan, and I just think Dr. Foe always talked about the fundamentals of the faith and fundamentals of living a good Christian life. And I believe the same way about football. You know, I went up to Maryland as a grad assistant, but I had no thought of even getting a master's degree. My whole thought was I wanted to be the best football coach I could be. And Coach Royer told me that Coach Claiborne was the best guy I could be around to do that. So the Lord worked it out where he finally let us come. And I wrote him, and you know, he kept saying, well, it's a tough area to live, like second or third highest cost of living in America up there. And he tried to discourage us. But finally, what I did was I thought writing letters isn't going to do it. So I officiated basketball when I was younger. Couldn't do it now unless they let me do it in a wheelchair. But I officiated like 26 games on Friday evenings, all day Saturday, and most of the day Sunday. Got enough money to get a plane ticket, and we flew up to Maryland, up to DC, into Washington, Reagan. It was national then. And you know, I finally just walked in the office and said, I'd like to see Coach Claiborne. Well, Miss Ellie, who was his secretary, said, well, he's not in right now. It's National Letter Day. He'll be in tomorrow. I said, what time? 8:30. Well, I was there at 8 o'clock, and spent over 2 hours with him in his office. And finally just kept pouring my heart out to him, telling him if he wasn't going to let me come and be a coach, I was going to go to every football office on the East Coast, or maybe even America, to get somebody to let me come. And he finally relented, and you know, the rest, as they say, is history. But I'm so much of a product of my background, Coach Claiborne in Maryland and that staff, and just so many things. But I'm just so blessed, you know, and that God allowed us to be able to go to Maryland. And it was one of the premier programs in the country when we were there in the 70s. You know, played for a national championship in 77 and in the Cotton Bowl. And just a whole lot of things, you know, that God allowed me to experience. And I remember standing on the floor of the Cotton Bowl, you know, in pregame preparations. And I looked up, and there was the Goodyear blimp floating over the stadium. And tears just started coming down my face. I'm saying, God, how in the world did you put me here? How am I standing at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, Texas? At that time, one of the 4 premier games, bowl games. And so, you know, it was just all God, really. And he gave me a good work ethic, and I feel so blessed to have been able to be here during these formative years. And then it culminated in '88 and 8-3 with losing 3 games by 5 total points. And, you know, it was just I loved it here. I loved coaching at this university because I wasn't just a football coach. I wanted to minister to those kids. And so God just allowed all that to happen. And a great wife, you know, that stood by me. And it's tough being a coach's wife. You know, I didn't, you know, when you're coaching football, you're surrounded by the trees and everything. And I didn't really realize till one day Coach Claiborne was at the University of Kentucky at the time, and I was, of course, coach here, and they were playing over at Virginia Tech, and he got me some tickets to go over and got a chance to visit with him and everything. And I guess I didn't realize, because I was never up in the stands, is what those wives and all they had to hear. And, you know, how can a guy be so dumb, you know? What a stupid call or whatever. And, but, you know, it's all part of the experience. And I tremendously appreciate my wife standing by me. I couldn't be in the Hall of Fame here, even at Park Street Elementary School, where I went to elementary school, without her. So.
Well, Coach, we appreciate your time and going down memory lane. Let me be one of many to, again, congratulate you for what you've done at Liberty, what you're still doing here at the school, and being inducted to the Hall of Fame. Thank you very much, and look forward to chatting with you soon again.
Well, thank you, Alan. I look forward to that as well, and I really appreciate you taking the time. You know, this modern technology is good, but sometimes it doesn't want to cooperate. But I appreciate you hanging tough the last 2 or 3 days and till we got this thing going. But as I said to you earlier, I really appreciate your work. I think you do a great job with the football. You know, of course, I'm coming to the games now, and I listen on the radio at the game, and you sort of fill in the blind spots. You know, you do a great job with that, and I appreciate your ministry here. But thanks so much for taking your time to talk with me today.